This podcast is brought to you by AC Americas, a distributor of lighting, audio, and video solutions. ACAmericas.net. This is the Tech Arts Podcast, where we talk about tech, leadership, and all things that concern church audio, video, and lighting.
Welcome to the Tech Arts Podcast in the Earthworks Audio Studios. My name is DL. So glad to have you joining us today. You're not going to want to miss this one. Coming up in just a few minutes, we've got one of the biggest names in live sound. Chris Rabold is joining us to talk all things audio. Chris has mixed some of the world's top artists, including Beyonce, and he's dropping real-world insight on everything from how he mics a snare to how he manages vocals on the biggest stages in the world. You're going to learn a ton from this conversation, and that's all coming up in about 20 minutes, so hang on. But first, a huge shout out to the incredible sponsors that make the Tech Arts Podcast possible. Earthworks Audio, Digico, AC Americas, and Paragon 360. We're so grateful for their partnership. Each month, they share content that keeps you inspired and up to date with the latest in audio, video, and lighting. So before we dive into Chris Rabold's masterclass on live mixing, let's hear from each of our amazing sponsors. Right now, we've got Ryan Shelton joining us to break down the latest updates from Digico. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, David. How's it going today?
Where are you at?
I'm actually in the broadcast room at Brentwood Baptist Church for the SALT conference. So they are using Digico's at front of house monitors and broadcast all in an optical loop to make their lives easy. And yeah, I'd asked the guy if I could use his room for a few minutes to jump on with you. And he said, yeah, he's not using it. So I get a cool background.
I know you've got some exciting announcements. What's new at Digico?
Yeah, we just launched a new small console. So our last console we launched was quite large. And I think probably everybody was like, wow, that's maybe a bit too big for my church or for what I need. And so we've gone completely to the opposite end of the spectrum for Digico. And we've launched the Quantum 112 or the Quantum 112, whatever you want to call it. It's a small. So it is a single screen, same screen you get on like the Quantum 225 or the 338, and same quantum capabilities. So mustard processing, so modeled dynamics, you get spice rack, you get nodal processing, you get all the cool things about quantum, DMI slots on the engine, multiple MADI connections, just tons of cool stuff, but in a very small package.
80 input?
80
channels.
inputs, 24 buses. Yep. Plus you get nodal processing on top of that. So it's a bit more effective for monitor mixing as needed there. If you were typically like double patching something, you can use nodal processing to keep you from having to double patch an input. You get all that. And it was designed to also be like a fly pack or a travel console. And we recognize not everybody's going to use it for that, right? That's a pretty specific use case for our touring friends. But, in a church, there are all sorts of venues all over the place where a 225 is just too big. You just don't need it for a chapel or for a multi-purpose room or something like that, where you're just going to have, a handful of infants, maybe a worship leader and a singer and a pastor speaking from time to time. And so this is meant to be that small format console with all the same tools and quality of a quantum console, just at a very small form factor. And of course, smaller price with that.
Yeah, I know a lot of churches do the student camp thing. Yeah. And they're always trying to figure out, oh man, this console's too big. And so they bring this little portable rig, and now the Quantum 112, I think, would fit perfectly.
Oh, yeah. So you can buy it with a custom Pelican Air case. And if you did go with opticore, which is not standard, but is definitely an option, maybe not necessary for student camp. But if you had just the standard console, DMI cards, everything, with the case, it's under 50 pounds. So even if you were flying to student camp, that would be, you wouldn't even have to be, somebody with special status on an airline to be able to get that through. It's just under 50 pounds. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me a little bit about sound devices. I know I think that falls under the Group 1 umbrella, not necessarily Digico.
Correct.
But at the SALT conference, you guys are using sound devices, and I think it's been a game changer for them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So they're actually using the sound devices, what we call the ARX32 or the Super Nexus. This is a 1RU box. It's a large on the receiving channel, so currently 16. But Sound Devices developed an octa-core box that connects to that 1RU box. And so these guys have two SD racks for all the stage inputs and for the outputs they're feeding for our wireless IMs. And we're able to just put into that same octa-core network, same cables and everything, just add it like it's a rack and be able to deploy super quickly. And it's made their lives really easy because we have front of house monitors and broadcast all sharing those two racks and now the RF. So there's no additional splitters. There's no hitting inputs on racks. They were actually able to get by with lower count of racks just because RF is on octa-core as well. So it's made their lives really easy. And we've started, I think this is their first deployment with it. And so I came by to help them get set up. And we were talking about how you can have the handhelds trigger macros and things on the Digico console. So if you have the button on the mic, they can press it and get the attention of the monitor engineer, things like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, if you're a church with a ton of wireless, you got to check out Sound Devices. They got the command button, I think is what everybody calls it. They've got that where you can talk to the band and trigger different things like Ryan's talking about. It's pretty cool. Plus the spectrum that you can use. I think you guys are gonna, if the FCC ever changes wireless again, Sound Devices I think is a good resolution.
Planning for the future. Like we all know that getting leadership at a church to say, hey, we got to invest in RF. And these are probably the same guys and ladies at the church who invested the last time. And they're thinking, why are we having to buy all this all over again? And it's pretty simple for you. You're like, hey, FCC made it illegal, and now we can't use our gear, so we got to buy new stuff, right? And with Sound Devices, you never have to have that conversation again. You make the investment, FCC decides they want to sell off spectrum, which they're always looking to do, and now we have a chunk of our space gone. Well, you can go anywhere from 470 to 1525. If it's open and legal for you in that space, you can go there. And if you have a Part 74 license for your venue, for your church, you can actually apply for what are called STAs, and we can unlock a unit for a previously illegal frequency to be able to use with your license. You can use it for a special event. So let's say you're doing a church production and you're in a congested RF environment. You can apply for those and get extra frequencies that are typically you can't use them unless you have that Part 74 license, and we can unlock the unit for those frequencies for that time period that is legal for you to have. So it's really cool and flexible for churches especially.
Yeah, Sound Devices does a lot of stuff. If you want to find out more information about it, go to sounddevices.com. And to check out that brand new console, the Quantum 112, go to digico.biz. So that's digico.biz or sounddevices.com. Ryan, thanks for joining us today and talking to us a little bit about some of these new cool things that you guys are releasing.
Very glad we could work this out. It's great to see you, David, and thanks for the time.
Today on our segment, Mic Techniques with Earthworks Audio, we are talking to Suraj about Podium microphones. Hey, Suraj.
Hey, how you doing?
Suraj, just about every church at some point in time has needed a Podium microphone. Whether it be for a funeral or just your every weekend service, it becomes a need, and you can't just throw any mic up there. You need something that performs at a very high level, especially when it comes to rear rejection or rejection behind the microphone. So Suraj, talk a little bit about that and why Earthworks has an excellent solution for Podium mics.
Yeah, thanks for asking. The new Gen 2 Podium Flex mics have a new refined polar pattern that offers excellent rear rejection and has a notable improvement in audio quality to its Gen 1 counterpart. This is especially true in small rooms, like small church services or at funerals, like you mentioned. With lots of people and a lot of rustling noises, especially if you're opening up books or something or service notes.
Yeah, you got your Bible and you're like turning through your Bible. You don't want that to be picked up on the microphone, right? So it kind of rejects a lot of that stuff.
Exactly. Environments like these often cause issues with capturing unwanted noise as such, and especially in the high frequencies that a lot of these front of house engineers historically have wrestled with and tried to EQ out, and that kind of ruins the intelligibility. But with these new Gen 2 podium mics, that is not the case, and you should be able to have a smooth sailing service with ease.
What do they sound like, man? Do they sound good?
On the market as close to your voice as they possibly can. We go for Earthworks products. We have and strive for the flattest, truest sound that we can achieve.
That's awesome, man. And tell me a little bit, Suraj, about what your role is at Earthworks.
So I am the account manager. I also oversee all of the service here at Earthworks. So if you have any issues with your Earthworks microphones, or you need a repair done, or you just have any questions, I'm the person you can contact. Most people contact me either via the phone, which you can find on our website, or through our service email, service@earthworksaudio.com. And I also do a lot of the technical writing with our R&D guy, Scott Lumsden, and we kind of collect and gather and update all of the information about our products, and he is the one who does all the testing on our products.
Well, Suraj is going to be joining us for these next few segments over the next few months. We've been doing these segments each month on the Tech Arts podcast. And I want to let you know that whether or not you're a seasoned professional or a public speaking novice, if you need a podium microphone, the Flex Mic has you covered. It's optimized for speech and intelligibility, as well as getting all the articulation out of that voice. Important features when it comes to any podium microphone situation. To find out more about the Flex Mic, go to earthworksaudio.com. That's earthworksaudio.com. Our main sponsor is Digital Great Commission Ministries. Whether you need help building a team, finding the right gear, or just better understanding the church tech world, DGCM is here for you. Because they are a 501c3 donor-sponsored organization, they come to your church for free and do an assessment of your tech, visitor engagement, and online streaming. Plus, we give away free gear. Be sure to go to audiovideolighting.com and register your email today. This will sign you up for all of the free giveaways and give you first access to everything we offer for free. If you want free resources, training, or consulting, contact Digital Great Commission Ministries today by going to audiovideolighting.com. That's audiovideolighting.com.
So yes, how the space looks absolutely matters, but so does how it sounds and how that makes us feel. It's not just about the speakers. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Paragon Angle. I want to talk to you about acoustics today, but not the technical deep dive that Mark Coble, one of our audio and acoustical designers, went into recently. This will be a little more of a 30,000-foot view, but especially important for churches to understand. Let me start by saying few factors shape worship as profoundly as acoustics. Poorly designed spaces can hinder engagement, make music unintelligible, and diminish both in-person and online experiences. By contrast, acoustically intentional spaces foster clarity, immersion, and emotional connection. Whether we're in the sanctuary, the new lobby areas, the children's wing, or the youth space, it's not just what you see, it's what you hear and how that makes us feel. Here at Paragon 360, our teams are in 4 to 5 different churches all over the country every week, from 150-seat spaces to mid-sized churches to the largest of megachurches. We also work in theatrical venues and performing arts centers. Often, Paragon's called in because the speaker system needs to be replaced. We get there and determine it's not the speakers, but the acoustics are a mess. However, people often don't want to hear that. For one, they may think the gray acoustical panels that are hanging in the gym are ugly and they don't want those in their sanctuary. Or maybe they've already spent a bunch of money on acoustics, and that did not help. Well, let's talk about those two scenarios. Acoustics don't have to be ugly. Today, there are many acoustical solutions that offer a myriad of infill options and almost limitless fabric options, allowing us to use textured fabrics, multiple color options, or even printed fabric options. The treescape you see in that background, all printed acoustical work. Acoustics don't have to be ugly. They can blend in or they can stand out. For those that have already spent a bunch of money on acoustics, maybe you have, but they're on the wrong wall. Many integrators, well-intentioned I might add, specify off-the-shelf acoustical products and stick them on the walls, sometimes in a pattern that looks good. But often there's not really even been an acoustical analysis done of where those acoustical issues really are. This is where a lot of money can get spent and we don't fix the problem. Sometimes those products are not even absorbing sound, they're reflecting it. Now, it's understandable. Acoustics are a very difficult thing to diagnose properly. Often people design stunning gathering spaces with beautiful lighting, materials, technology, but no one wants to stay in the space. They may not know why, but a lot of times the issue is poor acoustics. Conversations are difficult, the space feels uncomfortable, and people instinctively try to avoid it. This is where it gets critical for the church. In this day and age, where the new core of the church, millennials and Gen Z, are looking for connection, fellowship, and inspiration, we need to be creating very engaging environments, and acoustics are a vital part of that. That means no one should be selling you PA systems without having conversations about acoustics. It means that high-performance audio and acoustics go hand in hand in today's worship environments. In conclusion, this isn't about spending more. It's about spending smarter. In the future, spaces will be built for the connection, not just collection, of people, and acoustics will play a key role. When we get acoustics right, spaces feel good, people are engaged, we have better conversations, and people want to stay. So yes, how the space looks absolutely matters, but so does how it sounds and how that makes us feel. It's not just about the speakers. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Paragon Angle.
This podcast is brought to you by AC Americas, a distributor of lighting, audio, and video solutions. ACAmericas.net.
On today's episode of the Tech Arts Podcast, we've got one of the most in-demand mix engineers on the planet. Chris Rabold has shaped the live sound for artists like Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Lady Gaga, Kenny Chesney, Justin Bieber, Alicia Keys, Norah Jones, and more. When your client list looks like a Coachella lineup and a Super Bowl halftime show had a baby, you're doing something right. Joining us today to talk about the world of audio is Chris Rabold. Hey, Chris.
Hey, man, that was pretty good. I like that. I like
Super Bowl, halftime show.
Absolutely. No, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's good. That's accurate.
Yeah. You've worked with a lot of popular artists. You can kind of just say Beyonce and drop the mic right there. But before you got to that point, how did you get into mixing and what drew you to this career?
Yeah. I love that question. I love it because I have an answer. I don't have to really fish for one. And people that have listened to me in the past have heard me tell this story. But, I, like a lot of kids, I grew up with a number of passions and music. It was pretty much music and sports were the two big ones, And whereas some people managed to kind of do it all, I was an music enthusiast in that I was constantly listening and I was just a fan, but I didn't really engage too heavily past, piano lessons and this and that. Could kind of mess around on a few instruments, but I never dedicated myself to it. The dedication went to sports. And when sports expired, or when it was clear that the way I would want to continue doing sports expired, which is, we're talking college here. I couldn't play at the level I thought I was going to.
Which sport? Football, basketball?
Football was my passion.
So when you realized you couldn't make it to the NFL.
Yeah. And it's funny. I had such realistic, I knew that was never the thing, but I had pretty lofty goals. And as happens with people, injuries and fate and some of these other things come in and I was going to end up a little short of where I was capable of being. And it honestly wasn't too far into that new life with sports out of the picture that I felt pretty empty. And I felt, I just literally made a decision. I knew I had grown really fond of concerts, of the live music experience. And I had slowly gotten into the understanding what mixing was. And I was always so fascinated at why concerts sounded so markedly different. And I just really valued the live experience. And I honestly, I made a decision one day. I said, if I'm going to be on this planet, I've got to do something that I truly love, that I have a passion for, and I just honestly right then and there made a decision that I was going to pursue mixing. I knew it was music. I just wasn't sure exactly what in music, but I just made a decision. And then that was the impetus. That was the catalyst for, a zillion other things that would come. But that was it, man. I just made it my mind.
You knew what you wanted to do. You made the decision and you went after it. Just kind of pursued it. I think that's a good lesson for a lot of kids today. They kind of don't know what they want to do. Just, pick the lane and rock and roll.
Just go. And particularly, you say kid, man, and you couldn't tell me anything when I was younger, but I'm telling you, use that youth, use all of that blessing to including like that, the lack of pressure time wise, and just dive in. You know what I mean? Just dive, whatever it is, whether we're talking about music or doesn't matter what it is, just go. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. No. That's what I tell people. Like, you're going to make them.
Yes. That is this. There's a reason that is like the sage advice of every person that's been around for a while, is that not only don't be afraid to make mistakes, but like, I'm not saying aim for the mistakes, but that's where the growth, that's where it happens.
Yeah. Learn from the mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into this here. The first question out of the bat I got for you is plugins and philosophy. Mm-hmm. And when you think about plugins, how do you approach it? How should engineers approach plugins?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the first thing I want to say is how do I view them? How do I approach them? With great enthusiasm. I mean that. Like, there's such one man, in the capabilities only become more and more and more over time, but they're just almost too much of an option, but just an endless palette of potential and creativity and usefulness. Do I look at plugins, since we're talking about obviously the live music space, production. The problem is not the plugin. The plugins are not the problem. Plugins are wonderful. The fact that we have access to what we have access to now is wonderful. It's where we should be. It's managing the latency and the time. That's it. And that still remains to be in live sound the difference between ourselves and our studio counterparts, in that delay compensation is not automatic on most platforms. It is manual, it is tiresome, it is bothersome, and it's chore, So I approach plugins with great enthusiasm. Oh my God, it makes me so happy just to think of pulling something up and then scratching and pulling something else up and just trying. But every instance, every to and from whatever you're using, there's some bit of time incurred there, and there's some smearing, and that's what we need to really tackle is the time domain aspect of it all.
Well, what you're talking about there is using plugins to make your mix better. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of engineers get stuck on using plugins to fix like a mic technique problem.
Or just as a default. They just throw plugins on before they've even thought about why they're doing it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so talk a little bit about that. Like, what's your process when you have a problem with, let's say, a vocal or snare, whatever it is? Mm-hmm. What's your process to get to a plugin? Do you check where the mic placement is first? I mean, kind of go through that a little bit. You're a young church engineer. You're listening to Chris Rabold, and you've been told, which this is the case, throw a plugin on it and that'll fix it. Mm-hmm. Go through your process a little bit before you jump to the plugin.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And it kind of serves it up too for me to run with it in the right way. That whether it is a plugin or hardware or an onboard, I'm saying onboard because pretty much everyone's using digital now, or just whatever's built into the analog console. Before we get to any process, and this is not, in most occasions, this is in every instance at all times. The processing choices are inherently, inevitably downstream of mic choice, mic placement, technique. I mean, all of that. So it really does not matter what we're talking about in a processing sense. It is downstream, and you are more than welcome to, anyone, choose to kind of ignore the first part and then only work in fix it mode, but you're only making it harder on yourself. And there is art in both instances are art, meaning the miking, choosing the right microphone placement. There's an art in that. And then there's an art in the fixing. So I think some people think that, the mixing or the plug-in or the whatever, that's like maybe a little cooler, it's a little showier, but I no. It really does all start at the source. And that is the ultimate flex, is getting the source right and doing less processing on the other end. That is the true flex. That's the art of it. The end goal is just for it to sound anywhere from acceptable to great, right? So why not start, from the jump, doing everything you can? And that includes capturing the source in its best possible form.
Yeah, I like to say to myself, if I didn't have a plugin, what would I do here? And that kind of forces me to look at some other things, like what's my channel doing? What's the mic doing on the snare? If it's a snare issue, like did it get moved, which is 99% of the problem. The drummer moves it.
Yep.
Where is... what mic am I using? Is it the right mic on the vocal? Mm-hmm. I try to kind of get those things right first before I go to the plugin. And of course, there's some plugin stuff that's just, my go-to when I do it.
Of course.
And it's a great world that we live in nowadays. But because we live in that, sometimes lazy makes it worse.
Yes, always.
Easy makes it lazy. Lazy makes it worse.
Always.
And so I try to think, okay, if I didn't have this plugin, if it was crashed right now, what would I do first? And that helps my brain kind of, and sometimes you don't have time for that, but generally you do when you're in a church environment and you've got a 30-minute sound check, an hour sound check. You're not in a tour environment where it's like, yeah, we did the sound check 2 months ago. Just make it work.
Just keep doing the same thing. Yeah,
that's right.
And that what you're speaking to, the sort of fix it mentality that a lot of people have. And that is not unique to us in the live music space. You see it a lot in the studio where performance is sort of forsaken now because they'll kind of just get through a part and then turn to the engineer and be like, do you have enough? Can you fix it? Can you work with that? And that too is the wrong approach. It's, we have so many tools now to fix it. And truth be told, the reason these are options to fix it after the fact is that it is kind of a viable option. Like you really can fix a lot with a lot of the tools we have now, but it's causing more and more people to ignore the work on the front end. It really is a lazy approach, if I'm honest, just to kind of not mince words rather. Yeah, and we see it in the studio a lot too with players. It's like, are they good enough? You can fix that. Okay, fine. As opposed to just, why not just nail the performance? Same thing with miking. You know what I mean? Why not just nail it at the front? Then you're not fixing after that. You're only embellishing and making better.
Those are great insights, Chris. Let me talk to you about signal chain. In the pre-meeting, we talked about signal chain, but you didn't want to get into it too much. So I don't really have a question here. I just wanted to say, why does signal chain matter to you? Why is that a big deal?
Yeah. I think, and if I remember when we spoke originally, I think part of probably why I don't think I was holding anything close to the vest per se, but I know, and I told listeners, I told David this, it's like a lot of times I don't like questions ahead of time. I like to just do this in the moment and see what comes out.
Chris was like, surprise me.
Yeah, no, I feel it just seems so much more genuine. And when I think about it too much, then I try too hard. I do. Absolutely. Like if you ask me, what is my signal flow? And I have, nowadays it's so loaded because with, you said it, plugins or with processing that's available on desk, you can have multiple instances of multiple things, meaning you can have EQ at the beginning, you can have EQ at the end, you can have 10 versions of EQ. My brain still goes back to, I've got one EQ, I've got one set of filters, high and low pass. I've got one EQ, I've got one compressor. What would that look like? So let's talk about a vocal. I can tell you, and part of the reason I was probably hesitant or usually hesitant to answer is, yes, this is where I want to start, but I fully am open at any given moment to change things around. But for me, I like to think of, let's just go with the vocal, because that's a good one. A high pass, of course, obviously gain, which is a whole other topic unto itself. But post gain, we go to the high pass. I only use high pass filters on the console because I am forever worried about points of failure. And if I were to only high pass via a plugin or some outboard thing, and that outboard thing were to go down, then I'm left with, particularly if you're, it's a vocal or something, it's a moo, the most terrifying of all feedback, right? That really low, ominous, we're all going to die sound. So high pass on the desk. If I have it my way, it then looks like for vocal, I will do a little bit of corrective EQ on the front end. Static EQ. Like these are common. There are anomalies, problems in the vocal sound that they're not going anywhere. It's
low mids or whatever.
Yes, and whatever. So I'll clean up a little, some subtractive EQ there. I will then hit either a dynamic EQ or a multiband thing, and I do that because we are doing live sound. And if you're watching, I've got a microphone right here. Of course, proximity effect, mic technique, that's going to change the tonality in drastic ways. That dynamic EQ or the multiband compressor or whatever it might be, or both, it's going to handle all of those variances and create a more fixed product. Once I've done that, so we've cleaned up, we've filtered, we've cleaned up a little with EQ, we've then, I'll call it, stabilized the signal. Then I'll hit a compressor. If I can get away with it, meaning if the singer has enough oomph. Now, how I use that compressor is largely up to interpretation, kind of how I'm feeling in the moment. If I've got a lot of vocal, a lot of push from the singer, I'm going to use that compression creatively. Like I'm going to stomp on it and I'm going to make it do a thing. If there's not a lot of level, it might only be there to grab peaks every now and again, After that, if I have my druthers, after that, we will probably hit a de-esser. Sometimes I do a little de-essing on that dynamic EQ multiband part, but a lot of times compression can exacerbate, make worse sibilance. So after compression, I will hit a de-esser. And then usually at the very end, this is where I would put in an EQ that might contain some boost. I generally don't boost a lot in live sound on vocals, but if there's an EQ to impart some color, some sheen, not in a corrective sense that we did the cuts, then I'll put an EQ at the end. So that's kind of the way I'd like for it to look. If I don't have all those options, it's filter, EQ, compression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. I got a question for you though. Beyonce, tell us the signal chain for Beyonce?
Really simple. Really simple. I think it's exactly what I just said. High pass on the desk. I'm grinning because there's an interesting element in there, and that she very famously has these gigantic fans,
like fans blowing on
and
you.
Well, she obviously has billions of enthusiastic supporters, but fans, literal fans, they are there in the hundreds, littering a stage, and they sound like she's standing in front of a jet, and yes, and oftentimes I have introduced other high passes in the chain, not for just how you would normally use a high chain, just literally just to filter out even more of that rumble. And I've done that with plugins too. But with her, it's simple. It's just, but she's a world-class talent, which is why it's simple. You know what I mean? So just high pass, corrective, static EQ. It's exactly what I just said, to be honest with you. But I can tell you, and I know people like to hear about the candy. I'll tell you, we did it all in these past couple tours, and when I used to work with her in the past, it was all largely waves. It would be, Digico EQ and filter, And then we would hit either a C6 or an F6, or back in the day, it was a C4. Then we will hit, and as much as you guys want, this is like, oh, here's the secret compressor. Here it comes, the R compressor, everybody. I mean, bare bones, 20-something years old, as utilitarian as it gets. And not only is that my choice, that's her primary vocal compressor that her studio engineer uses and has since for 15 years, is the R compressor. And then after that, a little bit of de-essing and like an SSL style EQ in case there's some kind of embellishments or stuff like that. So I think that's it, man. I mean, it's simple. It's simple.
But you said something there that I thought was interesting, and it goes back to my dad would say garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
I think this is something that a lot of churches need to realize, especially the worship pastors who lead the worship teams, and that is the better the input is coming into the console, the cleaner that is, the better that sound is, the less the sound engineer has to work to either fix it or make it what it needs to be. The better your PA is, time aligned and tuned correctly, the harder that engineer, the less harder, if that's a phrase.
Yeah, no, I follow. I'm with you.
less work he's got to do to kind of get it right. And I think you went past that pretty quick, but I think that's super important. World-class talent, a lot less work has to be done. A lot less carving has to be done.
Yes.
Obviously the PAs are tuned and, you guys work several weeks to get it right and all that for the arenas. And I think a lot of churches, they have a bad PA. And when I say bad PA, not time aligned, not tuned correctly. They have worship talent that doesn't necessarily work really hard to kind of get pitch and, get all that right or sing correctly on the microphone. And then they look at the sound engineer and say, fix it. And I think that puts them in a bad spot.
If I can speak to that for a second, one thing that as soon as you started this topic that I wanted to throw out there as yes, a word of advice to anyone out there is kind of a selling point to stand on when you're talking to the client. When the client could be an artist, a pastor, it could be, literally whoever. You know what I mean? The performer, whoever is further up the food chain. There is no problem that we can have as mixers or as whatever your role might be in audio that isn't ultimately the client's problem 100-fold. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, if I have a tough time getting things to sound right, largely because of everything you just said, yes, it weighs on my soul. That's like my purpose. That's my reason for being there. It bothers me. But at the end of the day, like, no one's there to listen to Chris Rabold mix. They're there to hear the word of the service or the sound of the song, and it reflects more on those people than it does on us. So as we're vying for, hey, look, we really need to up the ante, guys, on anything, gear, performance, technique. It's like, look, yes, this is my problem, but the selling point is not it's your problem, but it's like, hey, no, we're in this together. And actually my success is your success. In fact, it's more your success because you're who people are coming to see and hear. So somewhere in that word salad I just said is something really useful when you're talking to clients, trying to sell them on the idea of doing things better, but also empowering them and being very real and very honest in that, hey, look, this reflects on you actually more than it does on me in the end. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think equipment is one piece of it, but developing talent is another piece. And when I go to churches, I talk a lot about talent ceilings, people hitting a level they can't seem to grow past.
Yes.
So for someone stuck at that plateau, how do they break through and actually get better? Essentially, how do you help someone grow into being a better mixer, a better sound engineer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because it's topical, and getting stuck is so topical. in and out of music, just in life in general, and so much of it really does boil down to belief that I can become unstuck. And while I understand that sounds very rah-rah, very, positive thing, it kind of is that. I think what we find is oftentimes when we're stuck, we might feel that we're stuck and we're doing everything we can to get out of it. But in fact, we're kind of doing everything to stay stuck. And that's a deeper concept that you really got to kind of think about. It takes a real level of some uncomfortable honesty to look at that too. But now bringing it back to in the mixing sense, how does one get better? It only ever seems, much like at the beginning of this, we talked about don't be afraid to make mistakes or to fail. That kind of growth that will make you better is going to entail you doing something different than you're already doing. You're going to have to reach outside of your comfort zone in some way, whether that is technique or goal, ambition, the kind of jobs or things you're putting yourself and others up for, or trying to go for. You're not gonna grow without stepping outside of your comfort zone. That's the first thing. That's the first thing I would say. Just do anything different. Anything. Even if you think it's wrong and you don't understand why people, you've got to do something different to generate momentum and to bring about change. Does that help at all? Is that too vague?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think stepping outside your comfort zone, lots of virtual mixing to kind of get yourself better and understand your mistakes, listening to other people. I mean, even like this podcast and listening to you and understanding how others do it. I do think there's a difference between skill and talent. And what I mean by that is you can teach skills. You can show somebody how to shoot a basketball, how to throw a football, and you can show them how to do it correctly. And they can practice over and over and over again. And those people will get better. But there is a difference between skill and talent. And some people have talent. Mm-hmm. And you can show me how to throw a football and I can get really good at it. But as soon as you hand that football to Tom Brady,
right,
pretty sure he's a lot better at it than I am.
Right.
And I think recognizing that as a sound engineer, we're not going to be able to go out and hire the Tom Bradys or the Chris Rabolds, the Pooches, whatever, to mix at our services every week. But understanding that we may have a talent ceiling that we hit. And when you have that big show or that big service, maybe you bring somebody else in who can help you either with your mix. I did it years ago. I had a big Christmas show and I brought in Ed Crippen. I don't know if you know Ed, but I brought in Ed Crippen to mix alongside me. And it was on an analog XL3. I'm kind of dating myself here.
Oh, I love that.
Anyway,
that sounds great.
We had the little sticky notes on, that was our digital mixing back there, by the way, the little sticky notes on where everything goes. It really, really helped me and took my talent ceiling up to the next level because he is talented. He's more of like the Tom Brady that's going to step in that particular situation. And so I think that's a big deal. Sound engineers become really all about themselves sometimes. Mm-hmm. I know I'm the best at doing this. Nobody else knows better than me. Even when you're mixing at a 200-person church, sometimes I see that attitude creep in. Try to get away from that attitude and try to realize there's people that can throw that football better than you, and listen to them and understand them.
And it's so interesting. I could not agree more with what you're saying. And if you've been paying attention for the last 5 minutes, drop an AirPod. I'm sitting here saying, challenge yourself, step out of your comfort zone. And all of that implies confidence, or maybe not confidence, more bravery, to be honest. But there's an air of confidence implied in that, and that, hey, step outside your comfort zone, know that you can, but really what we're talking about here is a level of humility, to your point, either, hey, I think I'm tapped out, or I think I just know all that I know and I need somebody to help me know more. And to have that level of humility, that is really, 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 really hard for people to access, but and I was just having this conversation with a friend yesterday. There's a guy locally here, a trainer, bodybuilder. And I like to stay in shape. I like to take care of myself. And I love being teachable. As strong as my ego is, which is strong, I promise you. I love being teachable, and he's someone I need to reach out to help me kind of get around the plateau or something. And I can't wait for him to literally tell me what to do and make me better, because he is better. He is inherently better. To your point, he is naturally more talented in that world than I am. Now, does that mean I'm incapable or inefficient? Not at all. But and to do what you did at that service, to reach out to someone, and I see that more and more, particularly with houses of worship. It really all started around COVID. I just did something in the church world literally last week, from connections I made during COVID, where there was a big event and there's, they're like, hey, just come in and be there for us. And I did it, and it was great. And I feel I made a difference, and I feel they got their money's worth, and it was just really wonderful for everybody. So, but that boils down to having that level of humility to know when and how to reach out, and say, hey, teach me, show me,
Well, this is a big one that I think will help a lot of sound engineers out there, especially in the church world. And I know you're going to light up when I say this: listening versus looking.
Oh, man.
I think in today's digital world, many mixers rely on meters, screens, visual cues. What's your take on mixing with your eyes instead of your ears?
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because it was something I wanted to touch on a second ago when you talk about talent versus skill. And what I want to talk about there is that talent and skill are separate. They are different. Skills can be learned. Talent is more like innate, kind of, and
born with it.
Yeah. That's a little harder to access. Mixing, oftentimes less so in the audio world, but is absolutely a creative endeavor. I say less so in live audio world, rather. Less so because a lot of times we're more reporting the facts than we are creating, depending on this. And the variables might be such that there's not a lot of room for creativity. In other words, you're in a really nasty place. Acoustically, the bar is set at, can people even hear what's going on? You know what I mean? Which that's far more damage control than it is a creative endeavor. But there are ways we can sort of synthesize or fake the creative process. And that is by relying on things like meters and the visual, this and that, da-da-da-da-da. So it can be done. I rely greatly. One of the biggest challenges I've ever had as a mixer is, now that I'm older, I'm in my late 40s, I can't see as well. And it kills me to not have that instant access of everything. I mean, it throws me off more than anything ever has, to not have all of the visual accessible to me. So that being said, I believe we can sort of standardize art. I believe we can synthesize the process and make it to where, yes, more or less by hitting your marks, hitting meters at a certain spot, it'll kind of sound pretty good. But at no moment ever would I, like, the notion that your ears don't come first is just, I don't even, you mentioned earlier, I kind of flew through the part about, you're asking about Beyonce's vocal chain. I'm like, well, she's a world-class talent. And then I just flew by. That is always the biggest point I can make, is that he or she is a major talent. That comes first. Same thing with mixing. To have to even say, hey guys, it's all about your ears, is almost an insulting statement to utter, because of course it does. You know what I mean?
But the problem is, I think a lot of kids nowadays who are getting into it, when I say kids, 21, 22, churches are turning to them for, let's face it, because they're cheaper than, the 30, 40-year-old who has some experience.
The path,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they're relying so much on their eyes and what they see, as opposed to their ears and what they're actually hearing. Well, yeah, I've heard this so many times. I've been standing next to a front of house audio engineer, and I'm like, the vocal sounds muddy, and he'll point at the EQ,
Right.
and
Well,
say,
I'm cutting it there. Right.
It's EQ'd right.
Yeah.
And I'll reach up and grab that thing and just yank some of that mud out, and they're horrified. They're like, that doesn't look right at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what does it sound like?
Right. And I'll tell you, it's hard because we have invited, and with good intention, have we invited the visual experience of mixing to mean what it means now. In other words, we have all of these displays at our disposal now, supposedly to aid in the process, but like a lot of things, best laid plans kind of, mentality where we've made it such that the visual is there, it aids in us, but then it just takes on a life of its own. And to your point, people will say, well, no, look, I'm doing all these things. Or now it's even worse, where everyone is just copying what they've seen on Instagram. And they're like, oh, but everything, this is the vocal chain. It's like, that doesn't mean a thing. It means literally nothing if you don't know why you're using it and why you're doing it. That being said, I'm a huge proponent of fake it till you make it. I did a lot of that early on where I was like, I don't know, this is what everyone else does. And then over time,
Wait. Did you just say fake it till you make it?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like where I did it. I was before the internet was what the internet is. It was largely print media. And I tried every single thing I read. If I were a kid now, I would try everything I saw on Instagram. But the point is, I then thought about how did it work for me?
What did it sound like?
Well, and that's what matters. And again, it goes without saying, I'm a huge proponent, believer, user of system tuning software, and I use Smart. I've always used Smart. But at no point does anything I see ever even come close to trumping what I hear, and it should just always be that way. That being said, I understand. I too fall prey to, I use Digicos primarily. I use a lot of different stuff, but for consoles, I use Digico. I hate their graphic representation of what we do EQ-wise. I can't tell you how many times I have sharpened a Q, narrowed a Q, because I felt the cut looked too wide. I'm like, well, that doesn't look right. So I do it. I absolutely do it,
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. That is too, we were talking about plugins. It's kind of like some of the old emulations where it just looks like an old console, because if I took 250 and dumped it, I never thought 2 seconds about what it looked like back in the day, So yes, guys, use your guys and gals, use your eyes to the extent you need to use them, but just never kid yourself that it's anything other than what you're hearing that matters.
Well, I'll tell you a story that's kind of interesting. We had a sound engineer. I was working for a church, multi-site, had a bunch of different sites, and we had a sound engineer that kept missing cues because he had his head, down, was looking at the sound console all the time, was looking at what everything looked like. And we covered up everything but the faders.
Yeah.
And it forced him to, raise his head and look at what was happening on the platform. Completely fixed the problem. Now, we didn't do it during the service. We obviously, but during rehearsal, when he was, we do full run-throughs and all that, the console was covered where he couldn't touch the EQs or couldn't touch the different things. I had to just mix on the faders. And it really drove home the point. Stop looking at the console so much. Mm-hmm. It's there as an assist. It's there as a tool to be used to help you get better, but it is not there to be the end all. Your ear is the end all of what it should be. Your eyes seeing what's going on, because, you miss the lead singer on a song because you're looking down at your screens.
None of it matters. Nothing else matters.
You're fired in the secular world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't do that. Look up. Keep your eyes up.
Yep. And, again, back to, no one's there to watch you mix or to look at your EQ or to see how many screens you had around you. No one cares. Nor should they. All that matters is that end result. And, something that you got the wheels turning here too. I wanted to say earlier, part of the reason that the fix-it mentality exists, is that because we can't see audio, it is an auditory experience. There's no visual. And I've said this on a million different podcasts or in conversations. People feel far more comfortable commenting on what they can see. Like, in other words, if it's a visual, they just feel far more comfortable on whether or not they like that shade of blue, whether or not that video is impressive to them. It's just easier to comment on. And while I maintain the belief that people know far more about what is pleasing on an audio level than they claim they do, there's this voodoo associated with it because we can't see it. And so a lot of times it's fear of people thinking they don't know what works that leads them to be just like, no, you'll get that right. It's because they don't know, they can't understand. So the lack of the visual is what sort of puts audio in this voodoo realm. But nowadays, the inclusion of all the visuals for those of us practicing the art of audio is kind of what's getting us off base a little bit, So I don't know. It all ties in. It really does.
But at the end of the day, rely on your ears. I'll give you another example. I was out doing a demo, and Digico was the console that we were demoing, and one of the Digico guys that were there said, man, it'd be nice to have a button where I could just turn these screens off for 30 seconds, listen, and then turn the screens back on.
I have for many years.
That's a cool idea.
I have been very vocal about turning off the EQ display if possible, particularly. And I'll tell you this, one of the things that Digico does do very well is, by and large, for a digital format, it is still laid out visually like an analog surface. In other words, the EQ is in a vertical line. There's just things that harken back to, you scan from top to bottom, not across, not not diagonal. It's just very, in that, where's the frequency, where's the boost, where's the cue, should be enough. I again, don't get me wrong. I use the visual to a large extent, including scanning EQs real quick, but, I would love to be able to turn some of this stuff off. That's
turn off just for a second.
And that's part of, I mentioned, I struggle with, middle age and seeing now. Part of me too is like, nah, this is just making you better. Because now you have even less choice to rely on the visual,
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I have to wear glasses too, and I feel like, I'm like, I got to look at the console. I'm like this.
Oh, always. It's totally.
You mentioned, that's what I did. Ah!
Yeah, no, and that's true, and it's whatever. It will cause you to rely on your senses even more. But guys and gals, I'm telling you, it is not a facet of certain mixing styles or a component of a train or a style of thought that is use your ears. It is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That your ears are the ultimate metric. They're everything. All this other stuff is window dressing and things to help us get there. Your ears are where it's at. I believe everyone has their own way of doing things. I think that's wonderful and beautiful. There are a few truths, and that might be the only truth in all of mixing. It's how does it sound?
Yeah. So here's a question I wanted to ask you, and I know you mostly mix in the secular world, but hiring for churches, I'm a church. I'm trying to find a great engineer, someone who mixes with their ears. What should I look for, or what are some things I should do to find that right person?
I actually feel, and I'm really lucky that and it really did all start with COVID. I have made so many good friends in the house of worship world because of that experience. And I have somewhat of an eye, more than a lot of people might, who aren't in the church world, on kind of how it works. And what I feel, you guys have a very, 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 very healthy ecosystem. There's something about the container of the house of worship scene. It just there's a lot. If there is a problem that I see in the house of worship world, is it is a very active scene online and on socials, and it's just, it doesn't matter, secular, non-secular, it doesn't matter. Just use your gut. In some of there's just a lot of, this is it, this is how it's done, blowhard kind of mentality I see really strongly in the house of worship world. And some people are drawn to that. They like that. They're drawn to that sort of definitive, this is how it is. Buyer beware. I think whatever avenues are available to you and the church you work for, whether you are headhunting on a national level and you're going for the major players, or you're just looking at a regional community level, aside from all the placement type things or the services available, to help you find someone, who do you trust? I mean, really, who do you get and it's interesting. Sometimes, because performance is what matters, there's a lot of times where I'm willing to get involved with someone who might not be my favorite person in the world, but if I think they're going to get the job done, I'll bend a little bit. But by and large, I think it comes down to, like, what does my gut tell me about this person? Like, do I feel good around this person? Do I trust this person? I really think you want that more than you want the bravado, than you want all the gear or all the chops or the big resume. You want someone who's willing to work with you. That's they just can't be understated, character.
Yep. I find it interesting you say that, because it's something that I say all the time. I would rather take somebody with good character and a good attitude who has a little less mixed skills than somebody who has a horrible character, horrible attitude, but mixes really well.
Always. It's never worth it.
They will poison the whole environment. They'll poison the band. And at the end of the day, it'll end up not sounding good.
It won't. It might for a little while. In other words, when I say I'll get involved, like, if I can keep people at a proper distance, or if it's a short project before the cancer-like inevitable happens and it poisons everything, then I'll do it in the short term. But if it's long term, it's particularly where, if you're sourcing volunteers in your community who are ideally going to be with you for a long time, you would be remiss not to go for the character over the talent, essentially. And I will tell you now, here's where there's a little double talk here. This is where all the metering and all the visual is in our favor. I too would rather take someone with a really good attitude, who's willing to be teachable, who's willing to listen. Well, both listen to what I have to say, but, listen with their ears. And we can help standardize. Again, this is where it goes back to, like, hey, look, you see where these meters are hitting? Do you see what we're doing here? I'm telling you, if we hit these marks time and time and time again, you'll get results. And if they're willing to do that and to pay attention to maybe some of the visual, the hope is over time that turns into, it's just like the kid that stays after practice and shoots 100 free throws and doesn't leave until they will become a better player as a part of, but through that routine. And I believe that can happen in mixing too. I do.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I believe sound engineers are the players. And every now and then you can get a good sound engineer that can be a player and a coach, but even the big boys at the big sport levels have to have a coach. And if you're a church and you've got somebody with a great attitude and they got some skills that you can teach, bring in a good coach. It's going to cost you some money, but bring in some people that can say, hey, here's how you develop the talent you have. Here's how you develop the skills you have. Bring in those outside sources. I did this at a church. It was a mega church. And I brought in some high quality talent to sit with our guys and gals, and say, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how you can get better. Here's how things can work better for you. Here's how you need to mix. And it made a big difference, because I think the players always need a coach. And I think a lot of times churches, your worship pastor on the stage, you'll send them to a conference, you'll bring in people to help them. but you don't help the person behind the sound console. It takes a little bit of money.
It does.
And I think churches miss that. You gotta, if you're gonna hire a full-time, sound engineer, pay them a good salary. Don't pay them one that makes them have to work 5 other jobs, because now their focus is pulled and they're distracted. Have a good coaching system, a good way to bring those people up. Hire the people with great attitudes and character, but then have the coaches that can come in and help them.
Yeah, I agree. And, the greatest players, to your point, even if they're only coachable because it's in their best interest, they're smart enough to know they need to be coachable, that they don't know everything. Now when you incorporate real character in there, oh boy, then you've got a real gem, someone who's of good character and is coachable and is talented. Look out. Talk about breaking that ceiling. You will break that ceiling if you come with that. And I think far more people are that than they realize. Again, it comes to that belief, of like, just believe that you can be that good,
Well, I've met a lot of big time front of house guys that mix across the world. And I got to say, almost every single one of them, 9 out of 10, have a great attitude. They have a great relational capacity to talk to people. I can't say that for all the artists I've met, but I can say that for the sound engineer.
You will, and that's part of that staying power. Like there's plenty of, and there's always exceptions to the rules. There are plenty of jerk, type A, I know everything, that have lots of success, long careers. But by and large, the people with real staying power there's just something to being, they're good with relationships, or they're good in the way that you're saying. You find that with real staying power, consistency, you will find that trait. You will find that trait often,
Well, Chris, I want to ask you a couple more questions, and before we wrap up, I just kind of want to get this one out there. Tell us your snare drum, what mic you use, what mics, because there's probably a couple mics, and give us a little bit of your signal chain on your snare drums. Everybody out there listening is thinking, oh my gosh, can Chris talk a little bit about, snare? We talked about vocal earlier. Give us your snare miking and what you do with that.
Sure. And those are the two, right? Snare and vocal. Those are the two loudest in every mix.
That's all you need to have on in the mix.
Yeah.
Snare and vocal.
Now, speaking of problems in mixing, that's one of them, snare and vocal, and everything else is 9 billion dB in the background. Don't do that. And I've done that a lot. For me, snare is typically, it's either, I'm like most people when I'll be like, yes, I can do it with a 57. I can. I've tried every mic that exists in under the sun. I mean, everything. There was a period of time where I did get into, blending a dynamic and like a smaller pencil type condenser. I got into that for a while. Then I got into, there's a Mojave 101, which is a discontinued microphone. It's solid state and has a pad. And it just, it was just, people think condenser and they often think, oh, brighter. That's not what I like condensers for on snares. It's actually the body, and, oh my God, can that mic still, if you could find one, can it ever do it? But it takes it's not as colored frequency response wise. So you kind of have to doll it up with some EQ, but the way it takes EQ, ribbon microphones are similar. You'll hear people say they take EQ well. This microphone really took EQ well. So that was a thing of mine for a long time with the Mojave 101. Now I've kind of gone back to when the Telefunken M80 came out, it quickly gained favor, which is now, it's crazy. It's been a couple decades, I guess. It quickly gained favor as a snare mic because it's a super bright mic. Now I'm back, and for the past several years, I've kind of only been using an M80 on top because it has so much HF, which is why it can be problematic as a vocal mic for some people. You don't have to do as many boosts up top to get it bright and clear. And when we're miking snare drums in the live world, we're talking about close miking, and that can be a very unnatural sound, right? So for the snare top, nowadays I pretty much always gravitate to the M80 because it's bright, it can be fat, it can sound a little flat sometimes, and users will know what I'm talking about. There's something about it that I don't love, and that it doesn't pop like I want to per se, but it's bright, it's fat. Placement, highly, and we're just talking about snare top here. Do I use a snare bottom? I do, but in the best case scenario, I do not. That's what you want. And remember, a snare bottom, when we've got top and bottom, we're faking a sound with both that is what we hear in real life, which is, you don't listen to a snare with your ear over the head. You hear the snare, you hear the body, you hear it for some distance. That top and bottom is to fake that. So I hate when I hear a snare bottom in someone's mix. Like, it's the worst sound in the world. You want to use it and it's the worst. Yeah. But so is that boxy, close mic'd top often. Yeah. So to think of that bottom as an additive, and I'll talk about the bottom in a minute. And it is to fake the overall sound. But my placement, and I've been around the horn a million times with what it looks like on a snare drum, it's pretty generic in that point it where the person's hitting it. It is angled. I don't do straight across. It's absolutely angled. It's angled for a couple reasons. One, point it where the stick's hitting. There's your presence. There's some of that brightness. Show us sure. A little bit. So right here, with your hand. Right here. There's that. Here's the edge of the snare drum, right? Yeah. I come in like this, and I'm going to move my hand for a minute. I usually start at about 2 to 3 fingers. All of my stuff is fingers. With overheads, I measure those. Everything else is fingers. Usually 2 to 3. Here's a pro tip. If this is the edge of the drum, the further in you get, the more boxy, the more unnatural, fake boxy you're going to get.
More thuddy it's going to sound.
It is. It's just nothing sounds like that. That sounds like a live snare microphone, which does not sound like what a snare sounds like. As you get back, when I was younger, I was like, but the edge is that ring. That's all that nasty ringy stuff. Yes, more of the ring, the boing, the overtones will be heard as you get towards the back, but it also, though, gets brighter. And as you get back here, you will pick up more of the snary stuff. So I'm actually, at this point in my career, I'm definitely not away from the edge. I'm pretty dang close over that edge. So yes, you will incur some more ring, some more overtones, but it will inherently be brighter. Again, the goal is always, can we get away without not having to use the snare bottom, because there's phase issues. Even if you nail it, it's why would you not want to get it out of one? So anyway, kind of experiment with coming back more. You'll get a brighter sound. You'll get more of the shell. You'll get a more natural sound. So sorry, I'm saying a lot, but this is all super important. That's how I go about miking it. I typically go with that M80 these days. Once we get to processing, I will incorporate a snare top and bottom. And I typically, for my bottom, I used to think, again, how do I do this? This is the snare, here's top. For years, I thought it would make the most sense I do adhere to this top looking like this, and I'd have the bottom almost like underneath it at an opposite angle. After a lot of experimentation, I found that I actually like to put a microphone, since it's already an unnatural sound anyway. Like, the snare bottom sucks. I go right under the center of the drum, a fist depth. So forget a few fingers, forget that. We're going at full fist. Something about a microphone down there, and I like an old AKG 414, the BULS, like the one from the 90s that are super beat up, just a workhorse, the 57 of condensers, right? I like that, but ultimately it could be just about anything, because that mic's only going to be an additive. That's what my technique looks like. It's like one over top and then one right in the middle for the bottom, and they're blended. One thing I like to do, and this is really important to me, is I high pass both the top and the bottom at the exact same frequency with the exact same slope. You will find there's nothing wrong with sliding that high pass around on the bottom or the top. Watch what it does to your phase, though. Like, keep it, I always go to like 110. That's just a number I have. I go at about 110. They both get it. Listen to that. Find your phase relationship. It's critical. It's not an option. You got to listen. And there's absolutely a world in which you don't flip the polarity. When that happens, though, in my mind, I'm always like, there's a cable wired out of polarity. There's a mic that was fixed in 2004 wrongly. Like,
right, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. But watch what happens when you then start changing the high pass. The phase gets thrown everywhere. Or conversely, put a high pass on, like, say, the top and not the bottom, and then throw one in on the bottom and see what happens. Things will lock. So I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just saying what I do. High pass them both at the same spot. I do through the desk, nothing cool or fancy. I do some subtractive EQ to clean up resonances on the individual channels. On occasion, I will boost a little, like 5 or 8 or 10K or something like that, to get a little presence on that top mic. But by and large, I'm just going about the EQ on them. I gate them, usually both, sometimes not the top. I do some subtractive EQ to clean them up on their own in isolation. I then blend them. Again, ideally, I'm just using the top, but more times than not, I blend them. And I find that blend is not 0-0. That blend is often, I can't tell you how many times, it is 0 for the top and -9.
Yeah, just barely on.
Just on. Just in there. It creates that sense of depth of a real snare. That's the relationship. Those faders don't move. It's been established. I found it. They bust via whatever means. You know what I mean? Whether it's a group, an aux, a stem, however you want to say it. Those two, once that relationship is set and they're kind of cleaned up, that goes to a bus. This is where I do the embellishment and the heavy lifting. This is where it gets produced. That's where the sound will be different. Once they combine, you will now get a new sound. That sound oftentimes needs some corrective treatment for some resonances. So there's some cuts in there. This is where, if I were to compress, this is where I would compress. I use distortion and saturation in lieu of compression. And I use them in a way that they serve as compressor limiters. It serves as a limiter. It serves chops off the top. It'll raise that RMS. These are all, if you've ever heard me talk at all, these are big talking points of mine. And it is a different sound than a compressor. And I realize, particularly in the church world, oh boy, is the VCA compression sound just over the top and overused, more so than any other genre I can think of. And that's a sound, and people like it, and I like it to a small degree. But for me, I like to saturate and distort. That'll make it more harmonically exciting. It'll just sound better. It'll just give it more. I use that for dynamic control, and then I'll go in and I'll EQ pretty aggressively if I have to. This is where I go in with a colorful EQ or whatever I have. But if I have my pick, it's something with some color. This is where I go in, and maybe we give it a little low mid boost. Maybe we clean up the boxiness even more. And this is where I go in, and we start really cranking stuff to give it that top, that sparkle. And that right there, I'm going to stop right there because I've said a lot. That's how I get a snare sound. I'll do anything else I have to do, including a traditional compressor, including maybe even a multi-band type thing to kind of create some sort of faux dampening that's not actually occurring. I'll do all those things, but by and large, that's how I get a snare sound. That's exactly how I go about it.
Yeah, I think that was very helpful. We're going to have to do a full episode on snare, kick, and kind of just go through each instrument and talk it through. But if someone wants to follow what you're doing or even reach out, what's the best way for them to connect?
Sure. I'm not super active on a lot of platforms. I post on Instagram, which is just Chris_Rabold. And depending on where I am in my life, you might just find a bunch of pictures of my daughter or, but when I'm really busy and I'm active and I'm going in the industry, you'll see a lot there too. So that's the primary one. Ken Van Druten, who I know you're close with, that's who hooked us up. He and I, of course, did the Pooch and Rabold. I say, of course, but maybe you don't know. It's been a minute now. We did the Pooch and Rabold series during COVID. I will warn you, it has some colorful language in it. But that's on YouTube. You can find a lot there. And then, of course, if you just Google me, I've done enough media over the years that I'm kind of everywhere. Pooch and I also have an endeavor that one of these days I will finish my end of the bargain, the editing, and we'll put out there. It's a thing called Live Mix Presents. We get that going. That's going to be super cool. It is timeless tutorials, how to, from the basics to the advanced from he and I. Not like Pooch and Rabold was just conversation. It was just this, but that Live Mix Presents is us sitting there with gear, showing exactly how we do it. So somewhere in there, you can find me. Just Google my name. You'll find me.
Yeah, if you go to Instagram, it's at Chris_Rabold. That, how Instagram has the little link. You can click on that link, and literally everything that Chris just talked about is on that link there. He's got the, you did an MXU podcast, signal to noise ratio podcast. There's just a whole bunch of stuff there. So go to Instagram at Chris_Rabold. Hey, Chris, this has honestly been both enlightening and a blast. We're so grateful you took the time to hang out with us on the Tech Arts Podcast. Thanks for making it such a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very appreciative. I love doing this. I really do.
Well, that wraps things up for today's episode. I can't wait to talk to you on the next Tech Arts Podcast. Until then, I'm David Leuschner, signing off by wishing you a great day and praying God blesses every moment of your week. See you soon.
You have been listening to the Tech Arts Podcast, presented by Digital Great Commission Ministries. DGCM is a 501c3 nonprofit that was started to help churches with all things technical. Whether you need help building a team, finding the right gear, or just a better understanding of the church tech world, DGCM is here for you. Find out more about our free on-site visits, reports, and consulting by going to audiovideolighting.com. Digital Great Commission Ministries will help you run your church service like a pro. Find out more at audiovideolighting.com.
From sold-out stadiums to intimate live performance venues, sound engineers agree on one thing for the best digital mixing consoles for live sound. The only name that matters is Digico. As the recognized worldwide standard for live audio mixing, Digico consoles are renowned for their industry-leading sound quality and ease of use. Whether your application is in a church, broadcast, theater, corporate, sports, or installed sound, Digico offers compact and affordable products. From the S21 all the way up to the pioneering power of the Quantum 852, Digico delivers the workflow, the feature set, and the absolute reliability that the world's biggest tours and programs have come to rely upon. If you're looking for a sound console, look to Digico for your answer. For more information on Digico, go to digico.biz. That's digico.biz.
This podcast is brought to you by AC Americas, a distributor of lighting, audio, and video solutions. acamericas.net.
From front of house to center stage, for over 25 years, Earthworks microphones have sculpted the sounds of your favorite concerts, venues, and performances. Earthworks Audio is a sponsor of the Tech Arts Podcast. We are so happy to have them on board and excited to promote the new Earthworks SR117 vocal mic and capsules. To find out more about Earthworks Audio or to get your hands on this mic, go to earthworksaudio.com. That's earthworksaudio.com. Capturing emotion with sound. earthworksaudio.com.